Welcome to Meeple Mentor. I'm Jared and we're about to play First Martians Adventures on the Red Planet. Let's take a look, I'll show you how. First Martians has had a lot of criticism for having a difficult to understand rulebook, but I never saw it that way. If you've played Ignacy's previous game, Robinson Crusoe, you'll be surprised at how similar they are. So let's take a look at this great underrated sci-fi game. Feel free to pause the video as needed to follow along with your copy of the game. For your convenience, I've added timestamps in the description to the different sections of the tutorial. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell below the video so you don't miss any of my latest content. First Martians is a game about astronauts living on the surface of Mars in the year 2029. Their habitat was already built thanks to the Mars Colonization and Expansion Initiative, known as MK. Their tasks include laying the groundwork for the next stage of colonizing on Mars. Players must work cooperatively to accomplish the goals of the scenarios, make decisions together on how best to keep the habitat from falling apart, keep morale high, and meet all the objectives. If any astronaut dies, you lose the scenario. The game uses a downloadable app which is necessary for gameplay as it controls much of the random events, adventure effects, and helps you track the rounds. There are standalone missions you can choose from to play, or you can start the campaign game. Let's take a look at how to set it up. Before setting up the game components, have one player first download the First Martians app onto their phone, tablet, or other device. It's on Android, Apple, and PC. Lay out the game board in the center of the table. Now decide if you'll play one of the standalone missions or start a campaign. Either way, the rules apply the same way. The standalone missions are categorized into 3 types: Explore, Research, and Build. There are 2 to choose from in each category. The rulebook recommends for your first game to play the Make Yourself at Home mission first. Lay out the mission page near the game board. Boot up the app and select Single Scenario. Select the building category for the mission type. You can select the tutorial version or the standard version of this mission called Make Yourselves at Home. Each player should choose one of the 4 astronauts to be. There's the engineer, medic, geologist, and scientist. Tap on the app, the plus icon for each astronaut being used. You can even assign the player names as the ID. Only select the astronauts in play, so if you have less than 4 players, some are left unused. Give players the astronaut ID boards matching their choice. The first player you enter in the app will be the starting player of the game by default. You'll see the astronaut helmet icon next to the picture. Give this player the first player token, which can sit over their character's image. Give the players their matching profile card for their character and the 3 blue skill cards for their astronaut. Each one has 3 unique skills. In a standalone mission, players have all 3 of their skills available. In a campaign, you begin with no skills and must unlock them during the campaign. The profile card is just flavor text for establishing who your character is. Each side is a different profile, so pick one and place it near your board. When ready, tap Begin Mission at the bottom of the app. Next, you'll always be able to select a difficulty to play: easy, medium, or hard. I recommend medium difficulty until you get comfortable with the game. The app will have setup steps that you can proceed through one by one until the board and table are all set up to match the scenario. Just tap the arrows to the right. Once you hit the Ready button at the bottom, you'll skip ahead to the start of the game. I'll walk you through setting up and preparing for this one scenario, but you should know how to navigate the app's setup instructions when you play another scenario or start a campaign. The device being used for the game's app can be placed next to the board where it says Aux Device. Each player should place 1 red cube in the furthest left open space on their ID board, which will track their health during the game. There are pairs of player pawns available for each person to choose from. Everyone should take the 2 pawns in a color of their choice. Set aside the 4 AOM pawns, which are green, gray, blue, and light brown. These will be used in games with less than 4 players and are used to help boost certain actions. AOM stands for Automated Operating Machines. Find the 4 AOM cards and keep their pawn on their card. In a 3-player game, you may choose one of these to use and remove the rest from the game. In a 2-player game, you may keep 2 of them. If playing solo, you'll use and control 2 astronauts. All 4 AOMs are available to you, but each round you may not use more than 2 of them. You may also want to create some supply piles for some of the different tokens. These are different kinds of modifiers, these are morale tokens, and these are various objective tokens. Set aside the colored cubes. Blue cubes are used for samples found on Mars, with white and black cubes having various tracking purposes. The red and green cubes are to track the status of facilities. Green is working, red is broken. Set aside the 8 upgrade tiles near the upgrade cards. The round heart tokens are condition tokens. Shuffle these together and create a face-down stack. The GPS location-shaped tokens are known as POI tokens or point of interest tokens. Shuffle these into a face-down stack. Find the 8 shutdown tiles and sort them into 2 stacks, energy and oxygen. Shuffle each stack separately and keep them nearby. Lastly, there are 3 sizes of Mars region tiles, known as ROI tiles. ROI stands for Region of Interest. The small ones are Ring 1 sizes, which can occupy the first ring around the hub. The middle-sized tiles of Ring 2 ROI tiles that can occupy the middle ring around the hub. The largest ROI tiles are Ring 3 tiles that can occupy the outermost ring from the hub. Shuffle each of these ROI tiles into face-down stacks. Set aside the facility cards for now. In this scenario, you won't need the green direction cards, so you can return them to the box. Across the top of the board is a track of your general supply of 3 things: your energy, oxygen, and food. In this scenario, place the energy and oxygen markers on space 12 and the food marker at 10. Put 1 white cube on the 0 space of the morale track and 1 white cube on the 0 space of the stress track. Then place 1 white cube at the top of the round order section in the top left of the board. Place the hub miniature in the center of the Mars map, representing where you are. Hub stands for Habitable Units Block. Place the 2 rover miniatures in the depot near the bottom of the board. Collect the various facility tiles and add them to the game board in the following arrangement. There are 3 main sections of the hub. The top section is the system block. Place oxygenators 1 and 2, solar panels 1 and 2, and the farm facility tiles here. Place a white cube at the top empty space of the oxygenators and solar panels. Place a black cube for each astronaut in play in the farm's greenhouse column, starting at the bottom. This is how many greenhouses have been built at the start of the game. Then place a white cube next to each built greenhouse. These are plants produced by the greenhouse. The status of the facilities are all active and working, so in the center status columns, add green cubes to show their active status. 3 in each oxygenator tile, 2 in each solar panel tile, and 3 in the farm. The middle section of the hub is known as the living block. From left to right, add these facility tiles: a quiet place, crew quarters, med lab, and control center. Add 4 green cubes in the status columns for the crew quarters, med lab, and control center tiles. If playing with less than 4 players, find the auto scanner upgrade tile and place it on the upgrade area of the med lab. Remove its upgrade card so you don't end up drawing it later. The bottom section of the hub is known as the working block. Add the facility tiles from left to right: garage hall, probe bay, lab, and working bay. Add 4 green cubes to the status columns of each of these tiles since they are all active and working. I also recommend you find the 3 color dice matching the colors of these tiles and keep them above their facility area. To the right of each block is a malfunction track. Place a red cube at the bottom of each of these columns for the starting setup. Separate the malfunction cards into the yellow, orange, and red decks that correspond to the 3 blocks you just set up. Shuffle each deck separately and place their deck next to the corresponding blocks. So, red at the top, orange in the middle, and yellow at the bottom. At the very bottom of these columns is the malfunction box. Each scenario will be different as to which of these 3 are malfunctioning. In this scenario, all 3 blocks are working fine, so place a green cube next to each. You can keep the yellow, orange, and red malfunction dice near the board here. The app will direct you to roll all 3 of these dice now and move up the markers equal to your roll's values. Then draw a working block malfunction card until you get to one that says Complication. Resolve its effects and discard it to a pile next to its deck. Other cards drawn can be reshuffled back into the deck. Follow the rest of the setup instructions for the scenario based on the app. In this one, pull out 3 facility cards: the backup oxygenator, backup solar panels, and the backup farm. Keep them near the board. Collect all the research cards and shuffle it. Keep the deck near the board. Shuffle all the upgrade cards minus the auto scanner if playing with less than 4 players. Then draw 2. The tech room can't be used in this mission, so if you draw it, discard it and draw a new one. Place these 2 upgrades near the board and return the rest to the game box. Create a supply pile of the square spare parts tokens. They have icons and are color-coded. There's energy connectors, oxygen filters, hardware, and CPU parts. In this scenario, take 1 of each and place it in the available cargo bay. Additionally, place 1 white cube in the cargo bay, which will represent 1 seed. Then on the mission board, place 1 white cube on space 1 of its soul counter. Souls are the names of the rounds in the game. Then place a white cube at the 0% space of the optimum conditions track. Read aloud the background story found on the mission sheet or as displayed in the app. You'll now proceed to the start of round 1. That's all for setup of this mission. No matter the scenario, you'll always have to finish your mission before the end of the time track. Each scenario has its own track with its own number of souls. Complete the mission with all astronauts alive before the last soul and you win. Otherwise, you'll lose. The scenario specifies its mission objectives. The game's app tracks your mission's completion. Just check the menu and go to the quest log. In the log, the app shows the mandatory goals and optional goals. Anytime the group completes one of these, open this log and tap the checkbox next to it to mark it complete. Only the mandatory goals need to be completed to win. Finishing the optional goals generally benefits you and offers rewards that may quicken your pace to win, but aren't necessary. The campaign mode has different long-term effects for completing the optional goals. Additionally, the mission sheet may show a threshold value. If present, you must be at or below this threshold to win. Each astronaut can take a total of 5 wounds before dying. It's possible to heal wounds though. Should any astronaut die, the mission is lost and the game ends. Each astronaut has skills available to them which they can perform during the actions phase by spending morale tokens. Each has a default skill printed on their ID board with extra skill cards available with unique abilities. In a standalone game, all 3 skill cards are available. Available skills can be used only once per round. To mark that you've used a skill, place a black cube on its text to note you've activated it already this round. For the card skills, you can simply flip the card over. When triggered, resolve the skill's effects immediately. To track an astronaut's health, you'll have a red cube along the bottom track. It starts at the far left. When taking a wound, move it 1 space to the right. Whenever crossing over an icon printed on the board, you must resolve it. These icons are for health conditions. Each time the health cube passes over one when moving to the right, you take a random condition token. Should you draw a condition you already have, draw a different one until you have unique conditions. Each condition affects you in different ways as long as you have it. Remember not to gain a condition token when healing a wound and the cube passes over the icon. When gaining a new condition, its effects apply to the next phase onward, not your current one. The objective tokens are used situationally based on the scenario, usually used to track your mission progress. Red tokens are generally mandatory objectives, orange tokens are optional, and black for other. When gaining one of these, place it where the mission says to. If not said, then put it in the pending area of the cargo bay. Whenever collecting spare parts, samples, points of interest, or most anything else, they'll go to the pending area of the cargo bay. Anything pending here will move to the available area at the end of the round during cleanup. Much of the game involves icons and symbols. I recommend looking at the back of the rulebook, which is page 24, to keep nearby and review. It offers a lot of helpful information and descriptions for when you're unsure. For example, there are 4 types of spare parts in the game and may be named in an event or scenario. The lightning bolt is an energy connector, the O2 is an oxygen filter, the gear is hardware, and the chip icon is a CPU. Each soul follows a series of 6 phases, always performed in order. You can use the white cube at the top of the board to keep track of where you are. First is the events phase, then morale phase, production, actions, malfunction, and cleanup. Most of the players' decision making in the game happens during the actions phase. There are no real player turns in the game. Everyone cooperates in the actions phase to decide collectively which action should be done and by whom. During the events phase, the first player advances the malfunction according to the app. Simply move the malfunction marker upwards one space for the block specified in the app. If it moves to the top, also resolve a consequence. Draw the top malfunction card for its block and resolve its effect. Place the card in a discard pile next to its deck. Then reset the track to 0. There's a little bit more to it, but I'll explain more on malfunctions when describing that phase. The app will also describe an event, which the first player should read aloud to everyone. It may involve the whole team or one astronaut specifically. Events may have a one-time effect or ongoing. Some of these events require 1 or 2 pawns to resolve them during the actions phase. These can give you 1 or more rounds to complete before triggering negative consequences. You may get a clue as to what kind of negative consequence to expect by making inferences about what you read. The second phase, which immediately follows this, is the morale phase. This only affects the first player. Look at the morale track near the top of the board. Depending on where the white cube is sitting, the first player must either pay morale tokens to the supply, gain nothing, or gain up to 3 morale tokens. For each morale token they should discard but can't, suffer 1 wound for each. If you have the tokens and should discard them, you must do so. You may not choose to take wounds to keep your tokens. The third phase is the production phase, where your oxygen, energy, and food resources are produced and used. You'll need to calculate and adjust these resources along with your stress level and broken parts in the working block. Food is produced by the farm via the greenhouses numbered 1 to 5. Oxygenators 1 and 2 produce oxygen, and solar panels 1 and 2 produce energy. The 3 resource tokens along the topmost track are your reserves at your disposal if needed. The food, oxygen, and energy are produced and consumed right now. The white cube's position and the oxygenators indicate how many facilities you can fill with breathable air. Not every facility needs constant oxygen. Look for the O2 icon to the left of the status markers column. The farm, crew quarters, med lab, control center, garage hall, probe bay, lab, and working bay. Should you produce more oxygen than needed, add half of the surplus rounded up to your reserves by moving the O2 token up the track. If you can't provide enough oxygen, facilities become unavailable. The solar panels work the same way, but provide energy instead. The facilities that need energy show the lightning bolt icon to the left of their status markers. You can also gain surplus energy to your reserves if overproducing, just like with oxygen. And by underpowering the hub, some facilities will need to shut down. Note that you may not spend your reserves to prevent a shutdown token. You may never have more operation facilities than your production can allow. So with producing 8 energy from solar panels, 2 facilities must shut down. Each facility can only have 1 shutdown marker on it at a time. Usually you can choose which facility to shut down to maintain this equilibrium, and other times the app or game effect tells you which one. There are 2 kinds of shutdown tiles based on lack of oxygen or lack of energy. Draw a random token from the appropriate stack and place it on the facility showing the +2 stress side. You may not choose to shut down a facility to gain more resources or prevent some negative effects. Shutdown facilities cannot be targeted or used in any way. To produce food for your astronauts, look at the farm area. Should you have a new seed planted, move it up the growth track on the right. If already at the top, the seed moves to an empty greenhouse in the far left column. The second column represents the number of fully grown plants in the greenhouses, which can each supply 1 food portion each round. Add up the plants and growing seeds in the greenhouses to see how much food you produce. Each astronaut consumes 1 food each production phase. If you don't produce enough food, you must spend from the food reserves by moving its token on the track. If you still don't have food for everyone, decide who isn't eating, and they suffer a wound. Should you overproduce food, you can add it to the reserves like oxygen or energy. If either the energy connectors or oxygen filters in the farm aren't working, the plants and seeds wilt. Move any markers down 1 space each on the growth track. Discard it if it was at 1. Then move 1 fully grown plant cube to the growth track to slot 6. You may counter the wilting by spending an energy or oxygen as needed from your general supply reserves. This prevents wilting for the current round only. After handling the food, oxygen, and energy, you must adjust the stress track during this phase. The more people confined in the hub, the more stressful it is. Move the white marker forward on the track one space for each astronaut in the game. Other effects like the shutdown tokens will also add to the stress track at this point. Add those to the gained stress. Whenever the marker reaches or would exceed 18, a fight takes place. Each astronaut takes a wound, and the morale goes down by 1. Then reset the stress track to 0. Lastly, during the production phase, you'll need to resolve the active penalties within the working block. Look for any red status markers across the block. Ignore any shutdown facilities. There are 4 possible negative effects that trigger now. Only the ones with red markers happen. This broken buggy icon means you should roll the green wound die. If you roll a wound icon, the froggy is damaged. Place a blocked modifier token on the froggy's X face. It cannot be used until it is repaired. This icon with the cube on it means you must remove one sample from Mars. You may choose which ROI location if multiple contain a sample. The stress icon means you should increase the stress level by 1. The person icon means you should put the matching token on the working bay exclamation space for its facility. Next is the actions phase, but I'll detail that later. After actions have been taken, move the phase marker cube down to the malfunction phase. Each facility block has a malfunction track to the right of it, tracking how long until the next serious malfunction. Each one starts at the bottom and slowly moves up. Check for any penalties in the blocks showing the malfunction icon. Any in the row with a red marker next to the icon means to increase the cube up the track. Now you'll roll dice. The scenario's mission sheet will say which malfunction dice to roll. Additionally, look at the box in the bottom corner. If any blocks have a red marker next to it, add that color die to the pool. If green, don't add it. Take all the malfunction dice collected in the pool this way and roll them once. Depending on the outcome of the rolls, increase the color matching malfunction tracks by the result. If any track hits 5 or higher, draw the top malfunction card from its deck and resolve what it says. Then discard it in a pile next to it. Each malfunction card has a pair of keywords on it. Sometimes you'll be asked to resolve a card with a keyword. In those cases, draw cards one by one until you draw one that meets the keyword. Resolve it and discard the rest. Reset the cube to 0 on the track. Then if the next block in sequence has a green marker in the malfunction box, change it to red. The sequence goes from bottom to top. So if the living block had a malfunction card drawn and the system block shows a green status marker, change it to red. To resolve this from the system block, the working block at the bottom would get changed to red. This ends the malfunction phase, so you can move the white marker down the round order track to the cleanup phase. During the cleanup phase, follow these steps. Discard any tokens from the exclamation point space of each facility. Then move tokens from the arrow space over to the exclamation space. Anything in the pending area of the cargo bay now moves to the available area. If gaining an upgrade this way, immediately place it in the facility it goes. Reset the white marker to the top of the round order track. Astronauts who used their ID board skill should discard the black markers and flip over skill cards to become available again. Pass the first player token clockwise to the next player and move the white marker forward on the soul counter found on the mission sheet. On the app, the new first player taps the next round button. Continue with the next round or in the game as relevant. The crux of the game is the actions phase. First Martians is completely cooperative, and in the actions phase, you should work together to plan which actions to take. The player's action pawns and AOM pawns are allocated on the game board with everyone's collective input. No actions are resolved until all the pawns are placed and everyone is in agreement. Everyone's pawns must be used, unless there's a game effect preventing it. AOM pawns available to you don't have to be used. Pawns can be placed in the hub, on Mars, or sometimes on the mission sheet, depending on which action is being taken. The actions are resolved in a specific order from top to bottom of the board. First events, then a quiet place, crew quarters, med lab, control center, garage hall, probe bay, lab, and working bay. Any actions to be resolved that don't fall into one of these categories will happen at the end in the order of your choice. Most mission sheet actions in a scenario will fall into one of the 4 working bay facilities. Look for the icon on the mission sheet and match it with the facility. Actions assigned within a facility all happen before moving on to the next. Once all actions are resolved, move the white marker down to the malfunction phase. The action area or facility will show a number of worker icons on it, indicating how many pawns are needed to successfully complete it. If only one worker icon is shown, then only one pawn is needed to do the action. However, if it shows these series of icons with one worker or two workers together, then you must choose one or two pawns. Stacking two pawns on the action will make it automatically successful. Placing only one pawn means you must roll the 3 action dice to determine the outcome. Multiple players can do the same action, but each stack of pawns is considered a separate action. For example, a quiet place facility only needs one pawn to be successful. With one pawn of each player here, each player can resolve the action successfully. A player could also choose to put both their pawns here to do the action twice. Looking at a facility that requires 2 pawns for an auto success, 2 single pawns by themselves shows 2 separate actions requiring dice rolls to determine their success. A single pawn and a player's double pawns stacked here indicate 2 actions. Only the red player in this case must roll dice to determine the outcome. The 2 stacked pawns will be automatically successful for the purple player. You may use one of your pawns to help another player auto-succeed in action by putting your pawn underneath theirs. Whoever's pawn is on top is the one doing the action. It's best to place the pawns for an action near the area where you're taking the action. For example, you'll be resolving an explore action on Mars, so place the pawns on the planet itself, even though you'll resolve the action when it's time for the garage hall facility to trigger. When gathering a sample from the surface, place the pawn stack on the ROI tile you want to gather from instead of the probe bay facility itself. Likewise, for repairs of the hub, place the pawns next to the red status marker you're attempting to fix. Only resolve the action when the working bay facility should trigger. Some actions may require a resource or spare part to complete. You must have it available to be able to take the action. To spend a part, discard the token back to the supply. To use reserves from the general supply, move the tracker token on the supply track to spend the resource. You spend it whether you're successful with the action or not. The automated operating machines give you a pawn to use to support an action in the working bay. Their pawns are color-coded to match each of the 4 facilities, 1 pawn per facility. The AOM pawn can be used as a support or to do the action on its own. In that case, the player using it should take the AOM card in front of them to remember who's doing the action. The operator of the AOM should roll the dice for the action if necessary. There are 2 rover miniatures that can be used to help you take actions outside the hub, on the surface of Mars. There's the smaller Froggy rover and the heavy-duty Scorpio. Neither rover can be used on its own. You must allocate at least 1 pawn to the action along with the rover. An AOM pawn can work the rover on its own without a player pawn. When using a rover, place its miniature with the stack of pawns on the planet. You may never use 2 rovers for a single action. You may use any number of pawns with a rover to resolve an action, but whichever pawn color is on top of the stack is the player resolving the action. The others are just assisting. The Froggy Rover may only be used for the explore action. Using it adds 2 pawns to the total number of pawns. The Scorpio Rover adds 1 pawn towards either an explore, gather, research, or build action, as long as the action is taken on Mars outside the hub. When done with its action, place the rover back in its depot space on the board. The yellow tokens are action modifiers that have various effects. If the token is on the exclamation point area of a facility, it is active this round. If not, it has no effect. The token only affects actions associated with the facility it's attached to. The rovers themselves may have a modifier or penalty token next to them. These must be added to the action's cost as well if using the rover. However, if the X token is on it, the rover is blocked. No one may use this rover until repaired. A separate build action will need to be completed to remove each blocked token. A blocked token on a facility prevents players from using it this round. This modifier token means it requires 1 additional pawn to the normal cost. So here, you must use 2 pawns to even be able to attempt rolling the dice. It would take 3 pawns to auto-succeed. The wound modifier token means the player must suffer a wound to take the action. The question mark token is the adventure modifier. When taking an action here, you must also resolve an adventure on the app, matching the color of the facility. Select the green adventure for the explore action, gray for gather or unwind, blue for research or heal, and brown for build or manage actions. This rotating arrows icon applies if you must roll the dice when taking the action. When you roll a success, you must re-roll it once and take the new result. The rover icon modifier only applies when using a rover with the action. When you do, roll the green wound die at the end of the action phase. If you roll a wound, the rover becomes damaged. Add a block token to the X space of the used rover. An action may have additional costs or penalties. Some actions require you to take a wound, spend a spare part, or spend oxygen from the general supply. If you can't do it, or it would cause your astronaut to die, you may not take the action. Actions may be referred to by their type, matching the facility's icons. When taking the action, you must pay all costs and penalties in that facility matching the action's type. Check the icons in the facility next to any red markers. Apply the penalties as described in the appendix page of the rulebook on page 24. This icon has to do with the block's malfunction track. Increase the malfunction marker 1 space. The plant icon means your plants are dying. You should apply the effects of wilting. This icon prohibits you from using a rover in this action. The energy icon means you must spend an energy resource from your reserves to attempt the action. Likewise, the oxygen icon means you should spend an oxygen from the reserves. The checkmark icon requires a successful roll even when you used enough pawns to automatically succeed at the action. You must roll the success die and get a successful result. The sample icon means you must remove one sample from any ROI on Mars if there is one. You can choose which. The stress icon means you should increase the total stress level by 1. The worker icon found in the working bay means you must add a worker token modifier to the exclamation point area of the facility. The pawn cost of the working bay actions are increased by 1 pawn. When attempting an action with less than the required pawns for automatic success, you'll need to roll the 3 colored dice matching the action type. Each set has the same 3 dice: the success die, the wound die, and the adventure die. If you roll the check mark on the success die, you succeed at the action. If you roll the 2 plus symbols on it, you fail the action. Instead, you may gain 2 morale tokens. On the wound die, if you roll the wound icon, your astronaut takes a wound. A blank result on the die does nothing. On the adventure die, rolling the question mark means you must resolve an adventure in the app. For rolling a blank result, nothing happens. You can succeed at doing the action and still take a wound and resolve an adventure. Those results don't affect the success of the action. Resolve any wounds or adventures before proceeding with your action. Anytime you need to resolve an adventure, go to the First Martians app running on your device. These can be triggered by rolling the adventure die or other game effects like some events. You must do what the adventure says, whether good or bad. Adventures only affect a single player, the one doing the action. Each adventure is tied to one of the 4 color-coded actions found in the working block. Select the appropriate color adventure icon on the app and follow what it says. Most adventures have an immediate effect, but some may have delayed consequences. The app may pop up the consequences in a later round. Once you successfully complete an action, take back the pawns used and discard any resources needed for the action. Then apply the action's effect. If you're unsuccessful attempting an action, return the pawns to players and the resources back to where they were. However, the general supply reserves must always be spent even if the action was unsuccessful. No matter which actions the group decides to take that round, they're resolved in order from events on down. Now I'll go over what each action does. Keep in mind you may have other special actions available to you on your mission sheet. Don't forget that multiple players can take the same action if you choose. The first action area is the events action. As the app provides events for the players, you often must send 1 or 2 pawns to resolve it. The app will also say what resources or spare parts are required. Place your pawn stack on the current event space or past event space to indicate which event you will complete. Do what the app tells you to do and click Completed. You must select which event in the app you are completing, and it will direct you to take certain rewards like morale tokens or to increase the morale track towards the positive side. If not taking the action this round, click Skip in the app. Whenever you leave an event incomplete, it may come back later with negative consequences. An event stays in play for 3 rounds unless players complete it. You may also see residual effects from completed events pop up later, called an event follow-up. Players can't control if a follow-up happens or not, but it's always story related to the astronaut the event was about. The next action to be resolved is the rest action in the facility called a quiet place. Resting only requires one pawn to complete. To resolve it, the player gains one morale token. There's no limit to how many morale tokens a player can have. Next, you'll resolve the unwind action in the crew quarters facility. This action only takes one pawn to complete. When resolving it, the player may choose to either increase the morale of the team by 1 or reduce the overall stress by 6. Adjust them as necessary on their tracks. Next comes the heal action taken in the med lab. The medic must assist this action with their pawn unless the auto scanner upgrade tile is there. If the medic player wants to take this action, they only need one pawn. With the auto scanner, players can do the action with only one pawn. To resolve the heal action, choose to heal a wound or a condition. To heal a wound, move the red health marker on your astronaut's ID board to the left one space. Ignore any icons passed over this way. To heal a condition, choose a condition you have and discard it to the condition token supply. Shuffle it back in with the others in the supply. The manage action comes next, found in the control center facility. Only one pawn is needed to do the action. When resolving the action, you may move any red malfunction marker downwards one space on a malfunction track. There's a malfunction track for each hub block. Finally, we move into the working block actions at the bottom. The first is the Explore action taken from the Garage Hall facility. Exploring lets you discover new regions of interest surrounding the hub on Mars. You may only explore accessible spaces, meaning empty spaces adjacent to already explored areas. Sharing an edge is adjacent, so diagonal exploration is not allowed. When choosing a space to explore, you must establish the route taken following already explored tiles. ROI tiles may have their own costs and penalties on them, which must all be handled when resolving the action. All the tiles' costs and penalties must be resolved following the route taken, including the start and destination tile. All movement starts from the hub in the center space. Movement isn't a separate action, but rather implies a path taken and determines the costs of the action. For example, each space and ROI tile on Mars has a worker penalty icon. The further the path taken to get to a space, the more pawns are required. For this reason, you should consider using the rovers to assist with the pawn costs associated with movement. The Explore action requires one pawn if you want to roll the green dice to be successful, or 2 pawns if you want to auto-succeed. Add to this cost any shown worker penalty icons, which is the number of tiles moving through. If you're moving 3 spaces away, the action cost is increased by 3 pawns. You may place the Froggy Rover with your pawns on Mars to decrease the cost by 2. So, 1 pawn needed for the action, plus 3 pawns for the movement, minus 2 pawns from Froggy, so 2 actual pawns total if you want to roll dice for the action. 3 pawns if you want to auto-succeed. Place all these on the space on Mars you're going to. When successfully exploring a space, draw a random ROI tile from the corresponding ring stack. R1 is the first ring surrounding the hub, R2 is the middle ring, and R3 is the outer ring of tiles. Place the new tile on the map on the explored space, and resolve icons shown. For each square cube icon on it, place blue sample tokens on the tile. If there's a point of interest icon, draw a random POI token and add it to the available area of the cargo bay. You do not suffer any of the terrain effects of the new tile by exploring it. All future actions taken going on or through the tile will apply. This icon is found on some tiles, but it is only used for certain mission-specific effects. The points of interest tokens have various effects and bonuses, which can be used at any time. Simply discard it to take the shown benefit. Certain POI tokens have symbols on them, which will be mission-specific benefits or effects. Check the mission sheet each game to see what effect those POI tokens have when found. After all Explore actions are done, move on to the Gather actions taken from the Probe Bay facility. The Gather action allows players to pick up samples or other resources from Mars's surface, moving them from an ROI tile back to the cargo bay. Some missions have special gather actions to pick up other items or objectives. You may never gather from an empty, unexplored ROI. The number of pawns needed is calculated the same as the exploration action based on the route taken from the hub to the destination ROI tile. When resolving the action successfully, take whatever you gathered and place it in the pending area of the cargo bay. Items gathered will become available for the next round. Generally, you may only pick up one item per action. As with the explore action, you must apply all costs and penalties for each ROI tile you move into. Choosing the shortest or the best path for your movement route can be important. For example, moving into this tile will cause you to take a wound, while moving onto this tile causes you to resolve an adventure. The color adventure to resolve is entirely based upon the type of action taken. This icon on a tile means the edge it's pointing to is impassable. You must go a different direction. The mouth icon on this ROI tile means you must decrease the morale by 1 when you enter the tile's space. The broken rover icon is found on some ROI tiles. Whenever you take a rover through this tile, roll a green wound die at the end of the action phase. If you roll a wound, add a blocked token over the X space next to the rover. Often with missions that require you to pick up objective items, you'll be tasked with randomizing their locations on the map. To do this, you'll grab the 8 green direction cards, shuffle them up, and draw a card to get a random direction. All the cardinal directions and midpoints are represented. These reflect the direction from the hub on Mars. After drawing a card for this, shuffle it immediately back in before drawing another card. The easy, medium, and heavy text shown can be ignored. These are used in very specific cases determined by certain missions. After the gathering actions are done, move on to any actions in the lab. You might do research, plant seeds in the farm, or do special research actions provided by the mission. You must use 1 pawn to roll dice to check for a successful action, or 2 pawns to automatically succeed. The research action may be useful in your mission to analyze previously gathered samples from Mars. If the research action has to be done on Mars, then add the additional pawn cost based on your movement to the destination ROI. Some missions make use of the 6 research cards. These show a range of percentages on them. Whenever drawing a card, check the number with the mission effect that caused you to draw it. Shuffle it back into its deck before drawing any more cards. When researching, you may examine a sample in the cargo bay or make discoveries. To examine a sample for the first time, move the blue cube from the available area of the cargo bay to the left space of the topmost empty research track. Place your pawns next to it by the research track. If successful, move the blue sample to the examined space. When examining a sample a second time, place your pawns on the track next to it at the examined space. If successful there, move the sample cube to the discovery space of the track. In the campaign mode, you'll need to advance samples along the track this way to make discoveries. Making discoveries lets the astronauts gain new skill cards. Also, while there's only 3 research tracks printed on the board, the number of tracks is unlimited. The other common action in the lab is planting new seeds. You may do the planting action only once per round. The farm in your hub can have up to 5 greenhouses built. A black marker in the greenhouse slot indicates a built greenhouse. Seeds and plants are both represented by white markers. Each greenhouse can house 1 fully grown plant, as demonstrated by the white marker next to it. Any white markers on the far right growth track are seeds growing. Seeds cannot provide food until it's fully grown and moved to an empty greenhouse. When the farm is below capacity for plants and greenhouses, you can plant a new seed. Eventually, the seed will grow into a plant and will be moved into an available greenhouse, providing another food portion. Planting requires at least 1 pawn if you want to roll the 3 blue dice to determine the outcome. 2 pawns will guarantee success. When you declare the action, place your pawns on the research space of the farm facility. Move a seed from the available cargo bay and set it on your pawns. When successfully resolving the planting action, move the white cube to the first slot of the growth track. Each slot can only hold 1 seed, but the track can be filled up with as many seeds as can be stored in available greenhouses. It will take 6 rounds to turn a seed into a fully grown plant. The last facility to resolve actions is the working bay. Here, players may take the build action to repair broken equipment and rovers, install facility upgrades, or create mission-specific items. To build, you should use 1 pawn if you want to roll the dice for the outcome, and 2 pawns for an auto success. Usually the build action is done within the hub, but if you need to build somewhere on Mars outside of the hub, increase the pawn cost by the movement cost to reach the ROI tile. When the facility begins to break down and you see red status markers in the facilities, you may want to start repairing them. There are two ways to make a repair on a red marker. The first is to use an available spare part that matches the part icon next to the broken equipment, and the second is to switch out matching parts between facilities. The repaired equipment becomes fully operational at the end of the action phase. Place your pawn stack next to the equipment to be repaired. When using a spare part for the repair, place the part on the pawn stack. When switching parts, take the green marker from the working equipment and set it on your pawn stack where the repair will happen. As soon as you remove the green marker, that equipment becomes broken. The repair only happens when resolving the action and becomes operational at the end of the action phase. When succeeding at the repair action using a spare part, discard the part, remove the red marker, and place a green marker on it instead. When succeeding and switching parts between facilities, move the red marker to the place you took the working part from, and put the green marker on the newly repaired equipment. If failing the roll for switching parts out, simply replace the green marker back where you took it from. One way you can gain spare parts is by disassembling one of the upgrade cards given to the group at the beginning of the game. Each upgrade card shows two spare part symbols on it. If you don't intend to install the upgrade during the game, you may choose to discard it to the game box and take the two indicated spare part tokens. Keep them in the available area of the cargo bay, and they can be used immediately. You may also choose to disassemble equipment in a hub facility to take apart. Simply replace the green marker with the red marker and earn the shown parts token. The new part can be used immediately or just kept in the available area of the cargo bay. Disassembling is not an action, but may only be done at the beginning of the action phase. The two rovers may also become damaged and blocked throughout the game and require repairs. Take the build action by placing your pawns in the depot next to the rovers you want to repair. One pawn can be used if you want to roll the dice for the outcome, and two pawns to automatically succeed. If succeeding at the action, you may remove one modifier token from the X space of that rover. There are several upgrade cards in the game, but each mission will limit which ones are available. The app will tell you which upgrades you can use this mission. Each upgrade card corresponds with an upgrade tile that is compatible with only one facility. The icon in the bottom right of the card shows where it is installed. Read the card's text to see what installing the tile will do. If you choose to install an upgrade, place your pawns on the card. One pawn will require you to roll all the brown dice to determine the outcome, while two pawns will be automatically successful. When resolving the upgrade action successfully, remove the card from the game and place the corresponding upgrade tile in the pending area of the cargo bay. It will become operational and added to its facility during the cleanup phase. Being a cooperative game, players all win or lose together. To win, you must complete all the mandatory mission objectives before the soul marker reaches the end of the round track and the final round ends. Once you've completed an objective, you must mark it complete in the game's app. The mission may have a threshold value as well, which you must be at or below to win. The app will ask if you're at or below that threshold. You can't win if you're above it. The game ends in defeat for the group if any one astronaut dies, you run out of time and don't complete the mission objectives, or if you haven't met the threshold by the end of the mission. There are 6 standalone missions you can play through, plus 2 campaigns. You can save the status of a campaign between games and resume again at a later time. However, you can't change the astronauts chosen, so when starting a campaign, you should carefully plan which ones to use. I encourage you to try a campaign after you're comfortable with the game's flow with the standalone missions. When ending a campaign game, you'll log the status of each astronaut and facility. The way you end a game in a campaign will affect the starting setup of the next. You should try the campaign with the same group of friends if possible, so everyone feels the weight of their decisions. Keep the rulebook handy and check BoardGameGeek.com for FAQs and extra content. Check the video description for links to Top Shelf Gamer for token upgrades, Cloud Puncher Games for board game shelving, and Mr. Meeple t-shirts for cool board gaming shirts. The Meeple Mentor channel is now part of the board game community, the Gateway Network, made up of great upcoming board game content creators. Originally founded by the Gamecasters podcast, the network includes Instagrammers, podcasters, YouTubers, artists, and even a board gamer themed comedy series. Click the link in the video's description or head over to the Gateway Network's Instagram to find great new content. Thanks for watching this tutorial. Like and subscribe if you found this teaching helpful. Stick around to watch another Learn to Play video. And remember, teach when you can, but always be learning. See you next time.